I never thought my life would flip upside down like this, especially not now, not when you expect things to just coast into easy street, you know? Less surprises, less wanting, just settling in. That's what I told myself anyway. Big mistake. It started so innocently, right? My nephew Brian brought his friend Ethan around for a week. He was polite. Quiet, you know, young guy, but sharp as a tack, really into cooking. I was charmed instantly by his curiosity, impressed by his talent, totally flattered by all his questions about my years in the food scene. But I didn't catch it at first, the way his eyes lingered a little too long, the warmth that crept into his voice when he said my name. That unspoken electricity that just grew between us when we were working side by side in my kitchen, I didn't see it, or maybe I just didn't want to. Then, bam, suddenly it was too late to turn back. Now, sitting here in the fading light of the day, I can't stop replaying those moments in my head. The dishes we made, the quiet. Secrets we shared, the way my heart would race like it hadn't in decades. And that one night, when the lines blurred, when everything went sideways, and we both fell into a place we swore we'd never go. It was just a moment, really, but it burned a mark into me. A mark that's half shame, half longing. This is my story, and it's not easy to tell. My name is Eleanor Vance, though most folks in this part of Brooklyn know me as Mrs. Vance, the retired chef living in the brownstone on Willow Place. For years, I ran a cooking school downtown, taught eager students the secrets of French cuisine through these elaborate dinner parties that were the talk of the foodie world. Thrilling days, exhausting days full of life. Now things are different, quieter. I moved here 15 years ago after the divorce, after selling the business. My days are spent in my little garden playing around with new recipes, sometimes hosting private workshops for people who are serious about food. It's a peaceful life. I've built it. I cherish it. But sometimes late at night, you know that loneliness creeps in, that ache for a life that just became too predictable. Then Brian calls, asks if he can bring a friend for the week. I said yes, without even thinking. Brian's always been like a son to me, the closest thing I have to a kid. He's 28 now, bright guy in finance. Though you can tell his creative side is fighting with the corporate world, he visits often brings life and energy into my quiet house. His friend Ethan was a surprise when they showed up, Brian bursting through the door, all energy as usual. Ethan followed, more reserved. He was tall, lean, with dark wavy hair almost to his collar and eyes that seemed to take everything in all at once. There was this quiet intensity about him, this thoughtfulness that got my attention. "This is Ethan," Brian said, clapping him on the shoulder. "He's a food photographer, and a damn good one too. I thought you two would have a ton to talk about." Ethan gave a small, shy smile, shook my hand. His grip was firm but gentle, his touch warm. "It's an honor to meet you, Mrs. Vance," he said. "Brian's told me so much about your cooking. I've seen some of your old features in magazines. Your work is incredible." I laughed, a little flustered by the praise. "Well, that was a lifetime ago, but thank you, and please call me Eleanor." The week started calmly enough. They spent their days exploring Brooklyn Heights and the promenade, coming back in the evenings for dinners I made using fresh stuff from my garden. Ethan would often hang out in the kitchen while I cooked, asking questions about techniques, ingredients, the stories behind my recipes. "I didn't know food could tell a story," he said one evening while I was kneading dough for a rustic loaf. "Oh, it does," I replied. "Every dish has a history, every recipe a memory. Cooking is like storytelling, it just unfolds on the plate." He seemed fascinated by the idea, his eyes bright with curiosity, snapping photos of the flour-dusted counter. "Do you miss it?" he asked. Suddenly, "Miss what?" "The school, the city, the buzz of it all." I paused, surprised by the question. "Sometimes," I admitted, "but life has seasons, right? This quieter season suits me now." He nodded, but there was something unreadable in his expression. As the days went by, our conversations got deeper. He told me about his struggle to break into food photography, the self-doubt that crept in when he compared his work to others. I shared my own insecurities, the fear I felt when I opened my school, the heartbreak of my marriage falling apart under the pressure of ambition. "It's funny," I said one evening as we sat in the garden, a bottle of wine between us. "No matter what you achieve, those little voices of doubt never really go away, do they?" He smiled a little sadly. "No, they don't. But I guess that's what keeps us moving, keeps us reaching for something better." There was a wisdom in his words that felt older than his years, and I found myself drawn to his perspective, his quiet confidence, the way he seemed to really see me, not just as a retired chef, but as a woman with a past, a story to tell. On the third day, Brian decided to go for a solo bike ride out to Prospect Park. I offered to pack him lunch, but he brushed it off, said he'd grab something at the park cafe. That left Ethan and me alone in the brownstone most of the day. I was in the kitchen chopping herbs for a stew when Ethan wandered in. He was carrying a stack of books he'd pulled from the shelves in my study, old culinary texts, a few of my journals from my teaching days. "Hope you don't mind," he said, setting the books on the table. "I couldn't resist. Your collection is amazing." "Not at all," I replied, glancing at the titles. "Some of those haven't been opened in years. I'm glad they found an admirer." He smiled, opened one of the journals, thumbing through the pages carefully. "You've lived such an incredible life. Sometimes I wonder if I'm doing enough with mine." I stopped chopping, looked at him. "You're what, 24? You have plenty of time to do incredible things." "Maybe," he said, his voice thoughtful, "but sometimes it feels like I'm just treading water, waiting for something to happen. I look at people like you who've built so much, and I can't help but feel behind." I wiped my hands on a towel, sat down across from him. You know what I felt at 24? Terrified. Every time I walked into my kitchen, I worried I'd make a mistake so big it would ruin me. And sometimes I did make mistakes, huge ones. But I learned that success isn't about avoiding failure, it's about what you do after. He nodded, absorbing my words. "That's easy to say when you've already succeeded." "True," I admitted. "But you're already further ahead than you realize. You have a gift, Ethan, and you have time to grow into it." He met my gaze, then his eyes filled with something I couldn't quite name. Gratitude, admiration, whatever it was. It made my heart skip a beat in a way that caught me off guard. "Thank you," he said softly. "That means a lot coming from you." I smiled, stood up, breaking the moment before it could linger too long. "Now, if you want to help grab that bag of potatoes and start peeling, I'll teach you a trick that'll save you hours in the kitchen." We spent the afternoon side by side, peeling, chopping, laughing as I shared stories from my years as a chef. He asked thoughtful questions, his curiosity as sharp as the knives he handled with surprising skill as the stew simmered. Filling the kitchen with its rich aroma, he set down his knife, turned to me. "Eleanor, do you ever think about the things you gave up for your career?" The question caught me off guard. Sometimes, I admitted. I gave up a lot, family stability, even love in a way, but I also gained so much. The key is learning to be at peace with the trade-offs. He nodded, didn't reply, his expression thoughtful. I wondered what he was thinking. But before I could ask, the timer went off, signaling the stew was ready. That evening, after Brian got back from his bike ride, exhausted and sunburned, he went to bed early, leaving Ethan and me alone again. I offered him a glass of wine, which he accepted, and we settled in the cozy living room by the fireplace. The conversation drifted back to food, as it often did, and Ethan mentioned his struggles with photographing desserts. "It's the lighting," he explained. "And the textures, they're so delicate, so easy to mess up." "Well," I said, setting down my glass, "I happen to have a few tricks for that. If you're up for it, we could whip up something simple and practice." His face lit up. "I'd love that." We went back to the kitchen and I decided on a simple chocolate souffle, elegant but easy enough for a quick lesson. As I gathered the ingredients, Ethan set up his camera, his movements quick, efficient. The process was easy, familiar, but it felt different with Ethan there. His quiet energy filling the space. He watched closely as I demonstrated each step, his questions, sharp, insightful. When the souffle was in the oven, I started preparing the garnish. A dusting of powdered sugar, a drizzle of raspberry. Ethan stood close, his camera in hand, capturing every detail with careful precision. "Let me try," he said. Setting the camera aside, picking up the sifter, his first attempt was clumsy, the sugar clumping unevenly across the plate. "Not like that," I said, laughing. "Here, let me show you." I moved behind him, guiding his hand with mine as he held the sifter. The moment stretched as our hands lingered together, the warmth of his skin against mine, sending a jolt of awareness through me. I stepped back quickly, my cheeks warming. "There, you've got it now," I said, my voice a little too bright. He turned to look at me, his expression unreadable. "Thank you, Eleanor," he said softly, his gaze holding mine. Something in the air shifted, then a tension that neither of us acknowledged, but both felt. The kitchen, usually a place of comfort, suddenly felt too small, too intimate. I cleared my throat, busied myself with plating, desperate to break the spell, but as I handed him the finished plate, our fingers brushed, and the electricity of that brief contact sent a shiver down my spine. For a moment, I thought I saw something in his eyes, something that mirrored the turmoil I was feeling. But he quickly looked away, his cheeks tinged with a faint blush. "Beautiful work," I said, forcing a smile. "You'll make an excellent food photographer." He returned the smile, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. "Only because I have an excellent teacher." The moment passed, but its echo lingered long after I went to bed that night. Lying in bed, staring at the moonlit ceiling, I couldn't shake the memory of his touch, his gaze, the unspoken tension that had simmered between us. I told myself it was nothing, just a fleeting moment born of being close and a little wine, but deep down I knew better. The next day brought a sudden downpour. Rain lashed against the windows. The gray skies dimmed the usually bright rooms of the brownstone. Brian, always restless, decided to drive into the city, leaving Ethan and me alone once more. We spent the morning in quiet company. He edited photos in the living room while I sorted through my recipe collection. By midday, the rain had gotten worse, and I suggested we cook something warm and comforting to match the weather. "Comfort food?" he asked, his smile brightening the dreary afternoon. "Exactly," I said, pulling a cookbook from the shelf. "How do you feel about making a croquembouche?" His eyes widened. "That tower of cream-filled pastries? That's ambitious." "Ambitious, but worth it," I said with a grin. "Come on, I'll guide you through it." The kitchen quickly filled with the sounds of whisking, sizzling laughter. Ethan was a fast learner, his hand steady as he piped cream into the choux pastries, his focus intense as he spun golden threads of caramel. "You're a natural," I said, stepping closer to watch him work. He looked up, his face alight with pride. "Only because I have the best teacher." There it was again, that look, his eyes lingering on mine. The warmth in his gaze making my breath catch for a moment. The busy kitchen seemed to still the air between us, charged with unspoken words. I turned away, reaching for the caramel to hide my unease. "Let's finish this tower before the caramel hardens," I said briskly, though my hands trembled slightly as I worked. We assembled the croquembouche together, our fingers brushing occasionally as we arranged the pastries into a towering pyramid. Each touch sent a spark through me, and I saw the same flicker of awareness in his expression. When we finished, the golden tower gleamed under the soft kitchen light, a testament to our shared effort. "It's beautiful," he said, his voice quieter now. "You were right, it was worth it." I smiled, though my heart was pounding. "Let's sit down. We deserve a break after all that work." We carried plates of pastries into the living room settled by the fire. The storm raged outside, but the warmth of the room wrapped around us like a cocoon. As we ate, the conversation turned more personal. He spoke of his family, a distant father, a mother who had always encouraged his creative passions. I shared stories of my own parents, of the small bakery my mother had owned that had sparked my love for cooking. "You've built so much," he said, his tone almost reverent. "Not just a career, but a life. It's inspiring." I looked at him, startled by the depth of his admiration. "It's not always what it seems," I said softly. "There are sacrifices, regrets, things I wish I'd done differently." "Like what?" he asked, his gaze unwavering. I hesitated, feeling the weight of his question. "I suppose I wish I'd allowed myself to be more open to take risks, not just in my career, but in my life. I was so focused on building something lasting that I forgot to enjoy the moments along the way." His expression softened. "You're enjoying the moments now, aren't you?" "Yes," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "I am." The silence that followed was heavy with meaning. He set his plate aside, leaned forward, his elbows. On his knees, his eyes locked on mine. "Eleanor," he began, his voice trembling slightly, "I need to tell you something." I knew what he was going to say before the words even left his mouth. I felt it in the way he looked at me, the way he seemed to be fighting to hold himself back. "I don't know how to say this without making things complicated, but I've never met anyone like you, the way you see the world, the way you've shared your life with me this week. It's made me realize things I didn't know. Needed." My heart pounded as I tried to find a response, but he kept going before I could speak. "I know it's wrong to feel this way, but I can't help it. You make me feel alive, Eleanor, in a way I've never felt before." The raw honesty in his voice left me breathless. I wanted to tell him he was wrong, that this was impossible, but the words caught in my throat. Instead, I reached out my hand, trembling as it found his. The moment our fingers touched, the tension that had been building between us seemed to shatter. He moved closer, his hand cupping mine as he looked into my eyes. "Tell me to stop," he whispered. "If this isn't what you want, tell me and I'll stop." I couldn't find the strength to say it. The walls I had built around myself, the careful control I had maintained for so long, crumbled under the weight of his gaze. "Ethan," I began, but the rest of my words were lost as he leaned in his lips, brushing mine in a hesitant, tender kiss. The world seemed to tilt as I gave in to the moment my hands, finding their way to his shoulders, pulling him closer. The kiss deepened, and for the first time in years I felt a rush of pure, unfiltered desire, a longing I thought was long gone. When we finally broke apart, both of us breathless, the reality of what we had done began to crash down. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice shaky. "I shouldn't have." "No," I interrupted, my own voice trembling. "Don't apologize. It's not just you. I couldn't finish the sentence. The truth of my feelings, so raw and unexpected, was too much to put into words. We sat there in silence, the storm outside mirroring the chaos inside me. I knew this couldn't go on, that the lines we had crossed would only lead to pain, but in that moment, I couldn't bring myself to regret it. The morning after our kiss, the brownstone felt different, like the storm had seeped into the walls, leaving a charged stillness behind. I woke up early, hoping to find some calm in the familiar rhythm of making bread. My hands moved automatically, kneading the dough, but my thoughts were anything but calm. Images from the night before played over and over in my mind, the warmth of his hand on mine, the taste of his lips, the raw emotion in his voice when he told me how he felt. It was wrong. I knew that, but it hadn't felt wrong in the moment. It had felt inevitable, like we were both moving toward it all along. I heard footsteps behind me, froze my breath, catching when I turned. Ethan was standing in the doorway, his dark hair a little messy, his expression unreadable. "Good morning," he said softly. "Good morning," I replied, forcing a smile. He hesitated, then stepped into the kitchen. "Do you need help with anything?" "No, I'm fine," I said quickly, too quickly. His brow furrowed, but he didn't push it. Instead, he sat down at the table, his hands resting on the surface. "Eleanor," he began, his voice careful, "about last night." I turned away, focusing on the dough. "We don't need to talk about it." "But we do," he insisted. "I don't want you to think that I regret it because I meant everything I said." I closed my eyes, the weight of his words settling on me. "Ethan, we can't, whatever this is, whatever we feel, it can't go anywhere. You know that as well as I do." "I know," he said quietly, "but that doesn't make it any easier to ignore." I turned to face him, my hands covered in flour, my heart heavy. "I don't want you to feel like you've done something wrong. This is on me as much as it is on you, but you have your whole life ahead of you, Ethan and I." I trailed off, unsure. "How to finish you what?" he asked, his voice soft but insistent. "I've already had my chances," I said finally. "I've lived my life, made my choices. This, whatever it is between us, it's just a moment, a fleeting connection. It's not something we can hold on to." He looked down at his hands, his shoulders slumping slightly. "I don't see it that way." Neither of us spoke after that. The silence between us was thick with unspoken emotions. That day, we avoided each other as much as possible. Brian came back from the city in high spirits, completely unaware of the tension between us. I busied myself in the garden, pulling weeds with more force than necessary, while Ethan disappeared into the guest room, probably editing photos or pretending to. At dinner, the three of us sat together, but the easy feeling of the past few days was gone. Brian filled the silence with stories about his day, while Ethan and I offered polite nods and smiles, careful not to let our eyes meet for too long. After Brian went to bed, I found myself alone in the living room staring into the dying fire. I told myself I should just go to bed, that tomorrow would bring some clarity, but my thoughts wouldn't quiet. "Eleanor?" His voice startled me. I turned to see Ethan standing in the doorway. "I'm sorry," he said, his expression serious. "I didn't mean to disturb you, I couldn't sleep." "Neither could I admitted, motioning for him to come in. He sat down across from me, his hands clasped tightly in his lap. For a long moment, neither of us spoke, the weight of everything unsaid pressing down on us. "I've been thinking about what you said," he began, "about how this can't go anywhere." I nodded, my chest tightening. "You're right," he said, his voice trembling slightly. "I know you're right, but that doesn't change how I feel about you." "Ethan, please. Just let me say this," he interrupted gently. "I don't expect anything from you, and I know I have no right to ask for more than you're willing to give. But I need you to know that you've changed. Me, Eleanor, you've reminded me of what it feels like to be inspired to see the world as something beautiful and full of possibility." His words brought tears to my eyes. I looked away, unable to meet his intense gaze. "You've changed me too," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. "But that doesn't make this any easier. In fact, it makes it harder." He reached across the small table, took my hand, his touch gentle but firm. I'll leave tomorrow if that's what you want, but please don't think of this as a mistake. What we've shared, it's not something I'll ever regret. I met his eyes then, and in them I saw a reflection of my own turmoil, longing sadness, a quiet acceptance of what had to be. Thank you, I said softly, squeezing his hand, for everything. The next morning, Ethan packed his things while I made breakfast. Brian was his usual cheerful self, talking about plans for their next trip, completely oblivious to the weight in the air when it was time for them to leave. Ethan lingered behind as Brian loaded the car. I guess this is goodbye, he said, his voice tinged with sadness. For now, I replied, forcing a smile. But I expect to see your name in magazines someday, paired with incredible photos of desserts and dishes I could never even dream of making. He chuckled softly, though his eyes glistened with tears. You'll always be my inspiration, Eleanor. Before I could say anything, he stepped forward, pressed a light kiss to my cheek. It was quick, fleeting, but it took my breath away. Take care, he said, his voice barely audible, then turned and walked out the door. I watched from the window as Brian and Ethan drove away, their car disappearing down Willow Place. For a long time, I just stood there, my heart heavy with their absence. But as the morning sun broke through the clouds, casting golden light over the garden, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. What we had shared was short. Yes, but it was also beautiful, a reminder that even in the quiet seasons of life, there's still room for connection, inspiration, even love. The silence in the brownstone felt heavier after they left. For the first time in a week, I was alone again, surrounded by the comforting hum of a life I had built, but now aware of the void their departure had left behind. I went back to the kitchen, the heart of my home, and found myself drawn to the croquembouche we had made together. A few golden pastries were left, their delicate caramel threads catching the sunlight from the window. I picked one up, the texture crisp between my fingers, took a bite. The sweetness flooded my senses, but it was bittersweet, like the memories of Ethan. I didn't let myself stay sad for long. Instead, I did what I always did when life felt unsteady. I cooked, I threw myself into creating something new, letting my hands work while my mind wandered. I thought about Ethan's questions, his curiosity, the way he had looked at me like I had all the answers he was searching for. I thought about the late-night conversations we'd had, the way he'd helped me see myself in ways I hadn't in years. And then I thought about the way his hand had felt in mine, his lips on my cheek that last morning I told myself I had made the right choice, that sending him away was the only way. But even so, I couldn't deny the ache of his absence, the sense of possibility that had left with him. Over the next few weeks, I started to notice changes in myself. I spent more time in the garden, experimenting with herbs I hadn't used in years. I reopened some of my old recipe books, the ones I'd tucked away when I thought I didn't need them anymore. I even started writing again, small notes and reflections about food memory and how our lives connect with the meals we share. I'd forgotten how much I loved putting my thoughts into words, creating something lasting from those fleeting moments of inspiration. It was during one of these writing sessions that a package arrived. I recognized the handwriting instantly. It was Ethan's. Inside was a small collection of photographs, carefully mounted and labeled. Each one was a masterpiece. The golden croquembouche we had made together, its caramel threads catching the light. The herb garden outside my kitchen, a tangle of green and sunlight, a portrait of me at the counter, flour dusting my hands, my expression calm and focused. But it was the note that brought tears to my eyes. Dear Eleanor, thank you for everything you've given me, not just the skills and advice, but the inspiration to see the world differently. Your passion, your wisdom, your kindness have left a mark on me. I hope these photos capture even a little of the beauty I saw during my time with you. They are a reflection of all that you've shared, all that you are. With gratitude, Ethan. I sat with the photos for a long time, running my fingers over the smooth edges, letting his words sink in. He was right. I had shared a part of myself with him, just like he had shared a part of himself with me. And even though our time together had been short, it had woken something up inside me, something I didn't even realize I had lost. The following week, I decided to make some changes. I reached out to a few former students, offered to host a weekend workshop at the Brownstone. The idea of sharing my kitchen again, teaching, connecting with others, filled me with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in years. On the morning of the workshop, as I stood in the kitchen getting ready for my guests, I caught sight of Ethan's photo of the croquembouche now framed and hanging on the wall. It was a reminder of that short, beautiful week and everything it had taught me about myself. When the first student arrived, a young woman excited to learn about pastry, I greeted her with a smile and an open heart. "What will we be making today?" she asked, her excitement catching. I glanced at the photo on the wall, then back at her. "Something ambitious," I said, "but worth it." As I moved through the day, guiding students through the art of making something intricate and beautiful, I felt a joy I hadn't known in years. I thought of Ethan, often, not with sadness, but with gratitude. Some connections I realized aren't meant to last forever. They are fleeting, like the perfect moment when a souffle rises or caramel hardens into golden threads. But their impact stays with us, changing us in ways we don't always see. And as the sun set over Brooklyn Heights, casting warm light over the students in my kitchen, I felt a quiet peace settle over me. I was still Eleanor Vance, the woman who had built a life out of flour and fire, love, and loss. And even though my story had taken a turn, I didn't expect it was far from over.